Chapter 4: The City That Remembers. Time is not linear in City the Temporal Arc. It loops, rewinds, hesitates, and surges forward. This is a place where history does not remain in the past, and the future has already left its mark. Every step here is imprinted, every action echoes, and for those who do not understand the weight of time, the city becomes a labyrinth that does not let go. For DMU and his classmates, this is just another school trip. For the city, it is a moment that has already happened, and is happening again. Scene 1. Arrival at City the Temporal Arc. The soft hum of the bus engine fills the quiet morning air. Students chatter excitedly, their voices rising and falling in bursts of anticipation. Outside, the landscape gradually shifts, modern highways giving way to roads lined with towering, unfamiliar structures. Time itself feels different here, as though the past and future are layered atop one another like a palimpsest waiting to be deciphered. The first glimpse of the city. DMU pressed his forehead against the cool bus window, his eyes scanning the world outside. City the Temporal Arc, a place where history and future converged, merged, and unraveled simultaneously. At first, the city looked ordinary. Grand skyscrapers reaching skyward, narrow alleyways winding like veins through the city's heart. But the longer DMU stared, the more he realized something was wrong. Or perhaps too right. Some of the buildings shifted, not in movement, but in existence. One moment, a brick structure with wooden shutters stood proudly on a street corner, its aged exterior whispering of centuries past. Then, as if a film reel had skipped forward, it morphed into a sleek glass-paneled tower, reflecting the morning sunlight like a beacon from the future. It wasn't just the architecture. The people looked different too. Some were dressed in traditional garments, flowing robes and embroidered hanbok from eras long gone. Others wore hyper-modern attire, sleek bodysuits with glowing circuitry, their faces concealed behind translucent digital visors. Even the streets pulsed strangely. At times, the cobblestone seemed ancient. At others, the pavement was pristine and untouched by time. The air felt charged, like the ticking of 1,000 unseen clocks beating in disharmony. Minho, sitting beside DMU, let out a slow whistle. "That clock tower's broken," he muttered, pointing out the window. DMU followed his gaze. The central timepiece tower of the city loomed high above, its enormous clock face encased in layers of metal and stone. The hands weren't moving in sync. Instead of a smooth tick forward, they jumped, hesitated, reversed, then surged ahead. "No, it's moving," a student in front whispered, brow furrowing. "Just not the way it should." A strange chime resonated from the tower, deep and hollow, as if marking an hour that had not yet arrived. DMU's fingers curled slightly against the windowsill. Something about this place felt unnatural. A city that remembers. AI stood at the front of the bus, his usual smirk absent. Instead, his gaze was sharp, calculating. "All right, listen up," he called out, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "This isn't like the last trip." The students turned their attention to him, some shifting uncomfortably in their seats. "City the Temporal Arc remembers everything." Jiong scoffed from the back. "Oh great, another mystical warning. What's next? A magic spell that makes us disappear." AI ignored him. "Every district here exists on a different time fluctuation. Some places move forward, some move backward, and others." His gaze swept over the students, lingering, just for a second, on DMU. "They exist outside of time entirely." A hush fell over the group. Minho shifted in his seat, whispering, "Outside of time? Sounds like a bad place to get lost in." Jiong stretched his arms lazily behind his head. Yeah, I get it. Don't break time. Let's go already." AI narrowed his eyes at him, but said nothing. He simply gestured forward. The bus lurched to a slow stop in a wide plaza paved with mosaic tiles that seemed to change patterns when no one was looking. "Welcome to City the Temporal Arc," AI said, stepping off the bus first. He paused at the door, his voice dropping into something quieter. "Try not to lose yourselves." The first step, the city reacts. One by one, the students filed out of the bus, their footsteps echoing against the plaza stones. The moment DMU stepped off, something shifted. A faint chime, distant yet impossibly close, rippled through the air. Not from the clock tower, not from any visible source. It resonated from the very ground beneath his feet. For a fleeting second, DMU swore he saw his reflection in the polished stone pavement. Not the one he expected, a different version of himself, standing slightly off-center, his expression unreadable, his own eyes staring back at him. Then, it was gone. The reflection was normal again. DMU inhaled slowly. Something was waiting, and it had just noticed him. DMU feels the first disturbance within City the Temporal Arc. The clock tower is unstable, signaling a disruption in time. AI knows more than he is saying. The city has noticed them. Scene 2, the ruins beneath the city, Jiong's reckless decision. The plaza hums with quiet energy as students stretch their legs, adjusting to the strange atmosphere of City the Temporal Arc. AI gives them instructions, but the city itself seems to be calling to them, whispering of things unseen, urging them to explore. One student, Giong, listens a little too closely. A forbidden path. Jiong had never been one for following rules. As the students gathered around AI for a safety briefing, his attention drifted elsewhere. His fingers twitched at his sides as if drawn by an invisible thread. Something felt off. Not wrong, like an opportunity. His eyes flickered toward the edge of the plaza where the pavement gave way to a narrow stairwell leading underground. It was barely noticeable, hidden beneath the shifting mosaic tiles, but for a brief moment, just long enough for him to catch it, the design shifted, revealing a passage downward. And more importantly, it was unattended. Jiong smirked. This city was supposed to be about time, right? Why waste it listening to a lecture? Hey, he muttered to a few nearby students, nudging them with his elbow. Let's check something out. Minho frowned. Dude, AI literally just said this place doesn't follow normal time. Jiong shrugged. So, we'll be in and out before anyone notices. A couple of students hesitated, but curiosity always won over common sense. Within moments, Jiong and 3 others slipped away toward the hidden staircase. Entering the ruins, a forgotten chamber. The air changed the moment they stepped below ground. The stairs spiraled downward in a slow, deliberate curve, each step colder than the last. The light from the surface faded unnaturally quickly, swallowed by a creeping blue haze that pulsed along the walls. Whoa, one of the students whispered. The stone surrounding them was etched with carvings, not just old, but ancient. Some depicted figures moving in endless cycles, caught between past and future versions of themselves. Others showed fractured clocks, their hands twisting into impossible shapes. It felt like stepping into a memory no one was supposed to remember. Jiong ran his fingers over the carvings as he walked, grinning. See? This is way better than standing around outside. Minho swallowed. I don't like this, Jiong scoffed. Yeah? Then head back. Minho hesitated, but the others didn't stop, so he stayed. The hallway led them into a massive chamber, domed and stretching farther than it should have. At its center stood an hourglass. The hourglass that shouldn't exist. The structure was massive, suspended above the ground by metallic arms that extended from the walls. But it wasn't made of ordinary glass. It looked like crystallized time. Inside, the sand wasn't falling. It was rising. Gravity didn't apply here. The grains of glowing blue sand flowed upward, as though time itself was being reversed. Jiong stepped closer, eyes gleaming. Okay, that's actually cool. Minho stayed back. Don't touch it. Jiong shot him a look. I wasn't gonna. But curiosity itched at his fingertips. His instincts screamed at him to prove something, that this trip wasn't just another boring lecture, that he could be the one to find something important. So, naturally, he touched it. Time fractures, the moment everything changes. The second Jiong's fingers brushed the surface of the hourglass, the world shuddered. A deep chime rang out, not from the city, not from the hourglass, but from everywhere at once. The sand froze. Then, in a single terrifying motion, it shattered. The rising grains of time exploded outward in a wave of glowing dust, rushing past them, through them, into the walls, into the air, into the very fabric of the city above. Jiong stumbled back, coughing. I didn't. Minho grabbed his arm. What did you do? The chamber groaned. The carvings on the walls began to shift, rewriting themselves, the figures changing positions. Some of them disappeared. And then a new presence filled the air. A voice. But not a voice. something speaking from within the time fracture itself. Who has disturbed the cycle? The city freezes, time is breaking. Above ground, DMU felt it before it happened. The moment Jiong shattered the hourglass, something ripped through the city. A wave of stillness, freezing everything in place. People stopped mid-step. A flock of birds, once soaring overhead, hung frozen in the sky. The shifting buildings of City the Temporal Arc stilled, no longer cycling between past and future. Even the clock tower stopped, its chaotic hands frozen in a moment that did not exist. But DMU could still move, and so could AI. AI's device flared red with warnings. Time fracture detected. Unauthorized disturbance, origin unknown. Except DMU knew exactly where it had started. Giong, he whispered. AI's head snapped toward him, eyes dark. Where is he? DMU turned toward the ruins. Below us. Without another word, they ran. Jiong discovers the hidden ruins beneath the city and shatters an ancient hourglass. The entire city freezes in place. Time has been disturbed. An unknown presence speaks from the fracture. DMU and AI realize what has happened and rush to stop it. Time does not flow normally in City the Temporal Arc. It folds, lingers, and shifts between the past and future, like an unfinished thought. But now it has stopped entirely. The moment Jiong shattered the hourglass beneath the city, something fundamental unraveled. The city no longer moves forward, nor does it slip back. It is caught, waiting for something to correct the disturbance. And deep within the ruins, something is stirring. Scene 3, the time fracture and the echoes awakening. A deep silence falls over the city. It is not the absence of sound, but the presence of stillness, of something vast and watching. Above ground, DMU and AI move through a world that is no longer ticking. Beneath them, in the ruins, Jiong and the others face the consequences of disturbing a force beyond their understanding. Above ground, a city held in suspended time. DMU ran through the frozen streets, his breath sharp in his chest. Everything had stopped. The city's people stood still, frozen mid-step, their faces locked in expressions of confusion or laughter that would never finish. The flickering temporal shifts of the city had ceased. No more buildings morphing between past and future. No more seamless rewrites of history happening before his eyes. It was as if time itself had been unplugged. Yet he and AI could still move, which meant they were out of sync with the city now. AI's wrist device kept flashing red, time fracture expanding, unidentified distortion centered below ground. AI cursed under his breath. This is bad. If we don't stabilize it, the whole city could collapse into temporal paradox. DMU knew where it had started. His gaze turned toward the ruins beneath the plaza. Jiong's down there, he said. AI's face darkened. Then let's hope he's still in one piece. Without another word, they rushed toward the hidden stairwell. Below ground, the fracture spreads. Jiong staggered backward, his hand still tingling from where he had touched the shattered hourglass. The blue sand that had once been contained now swirled around the chamber, fresh, a storm of flickering light and fragmented whispers. The walls groaned, the carvings shifting into new shapes. The figures etched into the stone began to move, some of them disappearing entirely, as if erased from history. One of the students with him let out a shaky breath. Jiong, what did you do? I didn't know this would happen, Jiong snapped, his voice raw. The sandstorm tightened, twisting into a shape, a form, something more than just time itself. And then it spoke. The echo awakens. The swirling sand coalesced into a figure. It wasn't Jiong, a distorted version of him, not quite real, not quite false. Its face was nearly identical, but its features were blurred, as if they had been painted in motion and never allowed to dry. Its eyes were hollow, glowing faintly with the same blue energy that had once flowed inside the hourglass. When it spoke, its voice was layered. Jiong's voice mixed with something older, something detached from time. You have broken the cycle. Stumbled back, shaking his head. No, this isn't real. The echo stepped forward, its movements eerily smooth, like a projection that had come to life. I exist because you exist. You shattered the hourglass. Now time is unanchored. You created me. Jiong's breath hitched. The realization hit him like a crashing wave. This thing was him, but it was a version of him that never should have existed. One of the students grabbed his arm. "We need to get out of here." Too late. The echo raised its hand. A wave of temporal distortion rippled outward, hitting Jiong and the others like a physical force. Reality fractured. Suddenly, Jiong wasn't standing in the ruins anymore. The loop? Jiong's fragmentation. He was somewhere else. A school hallway. His school hallway. But wrong. The walls were too clean, too bright, as if someone had scrubbed them of any signs of time. Students walked past, but their faces were blurred, featureless figures that existed only as echoes of memory. And then he saw himself. A younger version, standing by a locker, talking, laughing. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. Jiong's stomach twisted. This wasn't real. "You are unraveling." The echo's voice surrounded him, though the echo itself was nowhere in sight. "Because you shattered the hourglass, your past and future are colliding. Soon, you will cease to exist." Jiong clenched his fists, trying to steady his breathing. No, I'm real. This is fake." "Are you?" The moment the words landed, everything shattered again. Hernike DMU and AI arrive. The rescue mission begins. DMU burst into the ruins, AI at his side. The chamber was warping, its walls shifting between different versions of itself, sometimes whole, sometimes decayed, sometimes in ruins that hadn't yet happened. At its center, Jiong stood frozen, his body flickering between different versions of himself. The echo loomed beside him, its gaze turning toward DMU. Another one outside of time. AI's device flared with alerts. Temporal entity identified, Echo of Jiyong. Origin, distorted time loop. DMU locked eyes with the echo. "What do you want?" The echo tilted its head. "I am not the one who wants. I am the one who was forced into being." It raised its hand, and suddenly the ruins collapsed around them, folding into a spiraling vortex of time. Jiong's reckless act has passed. It lingers, waiting to be answered. Jiong's reckless act has shattered the hourglass that once anchored time's flow, and now something that should not exist has emerged. An echo, a distorted reflection of what could have been, now stands between the present and the past, threatening to erase Jiong from reality itself. DMU and AI have arrived in time to witness the fracture unfold, but can they stop it before Jiong disappears forever? Scene 4. Confrontation with the Echo. The battle for Jiong's existence. The ruins pulse with shifting energy, the very fabric of time splintering and reforming around them. The air is heavy, thick with the weight of the unnatural presence looming before them. The echo stands at the center of it all, its form unstable yet undeniable. Jiong is caught between his past and his present, his body flickering as his reality begins to collapse. The battle for his existence begins. The ruins collapse into temporal chaos. The moment DMU and AI stepped into the chamber, the entire room shuddered. The walls flickered, shifting between different versions of themselves. Crumbling ruins, pristine temple, empty void, each one trying to assert dominance. The Echo of Jiyong stood at the center, its distorted form wavering between presence and absence. It had no defined shape, no true solidity, only a fragmented existence, pulsing with the same blue energy that once flowed through the hourglass. And Jiong was fading. His body glitched, flickering between different versions of himself. One moment, he was the Jiong they knew. The next, he was younger, a version of himself from years ago, wide-eyed and confused. Then suddenly, he was older, a version that had never existed yet, still somehow did. His voice cracked, filled with panic. "I can't move." The echo's hollow eyes locked onto DMU. He is no longer real. It raised a hand. The air bent, twisting into long strands of temporal energy. The strands curled around Jiong's flickering form, pulling him into the fracture. AI cursed under his breath, scanning the chaotic energy with his device. Jiong's existence is splitting. If the echo fully absorbs him, he'll cease to be a singular entity, gritted his teeth. And what happens then? AI's gaze darkened. Then Jiong will exist everywhere and nowhere at once. The echo's words, the weight of a mistake. The echo tilted its head, its expression unreadable. He shattered the hourglass. Time does not tolerate imbalance. It stepped forward, moving in slow, deliberate motions. The way it walked wasn't natural. It didn't follow the rules of motion, simply appearing in new places without taking proper steps. You created me. Jiong's breath hitched. I didn't mean to. The echo's voice layered over itself, cold and absolute. Intent does not erase consequence. It extended its hand, and suddenly, Jiong's past selves materialized around them. Memories pulled from time itself. Jiong as a child, crying over a broken toy. Jiong at school, standing alone while others laughed nearby. Jiong, fists clenched, walking away from a friend after an argument. 1,000 versions of him, all caught in different pivotal moments of his life. Jiong froze, his breath coming in ragged gasps. No, this isn't real, he stammered. This is just... The echo's head twitched. You tried to be seen. You tried to leave your mark. Now you will become a mark on time itself. The strands of energy tightened around Jiong, pulling him toward the echo. He let out a choked gasp, his entire body flickering wildly. DMU acts, fighting the unseen battle. DMU didn't think. He moved. With a burst of speed, he lunged forward, grabbing Jiong's wrist, just as the echo attempted to absorb him. A jolt of energy surged through DMU's body. For a second, his vision fractured, and he saw it. Jiong's life. Every version of him. Flashes of moments. Jiong's first day of school. Jiong skipping class to prove a point. Jiong standing alone at his birthday party, waiting for someone who never came. Jiong sneaking out tonight, looking for something more. Something bigger than just being another student in another trip. It wasn't just Jiong's past. It was his reasoning. The echo wasn't just a mistake. It was the embodiment of every unresolved moment, every longing to be noticed, every fractured version of himself that felt incomplete. DMU tightened his grip. Jiong, look at me, gasped, eyes wide. You're not disappearing, DMU growled. Not like this. You're real. You're here. The echo tilted its head again, watching. AI's voice crackled through the chaos. DMU, you're disrupting the echo's control. If you can pull Jiong back. I'm already doing it, DMU snapped. But the echo wasn't done. It lunged forward, its form expanding, twisting, warping, becoming something larger, something consuming. A shadow of infinite Jiongs layered over one another, all reaching out. I am him. He is me. You cannot separate what has already been merged. The collapse, the last stand. The ruins trembled. DMU could feel it. The echo wasn't just absorbing Jiong. It was merging with the entire fracture, becoming something even greater. If they didn't stop it now, it would anchor itself permanently into the flow of time. AI called out. DMU, you have to break the cycle. DMU gritted his teeth. How? AI's screen flickered wildly. Echoes cannot exist without an origin. Remove the anchor, and the distortion will collapse. DMU's stomach dropped. Wait, you mean the hourglass? Nodded. The hourglass was shattered, but its fragments still exist within the echo. You need to sever its connection. His body still shaking violently. I don't know how. DMU looked at him, eyes steady. You don't have to. He turned back toward the echo, taking a deep breath. And then he plunged forward. The echo begins merging with Jiong completely, unraveling his existence. Members. Time does not make mistakes. Time does not simply erase the error. It remembers. Jiong's reckless act has shattered more than an hourglass. It has torn a fracture into the very essence of his existence. Now, the echo, his fragmented reflection, seeks to pull him into the fracture permanently, rewriting his fate into something unrecognizable. But DMU refuses to let that happen. With the ruins collapsing around them and the echo growing stronger, the only way to break free is to sever the past from the present. The cycle must end. But what will it cost? Scene 5, the last confrontation and Adagio's arrival. The chamber is no longer stable. The ruins of the past, the present, and the future are colliding in a chaotic spiral. The echo is no longer just a shadow of Jiong. It is becoming something more, something beyond a mere distortion. It is consuming the remnants of the hourglass, turning itself into a singularity that will cement its existence within time itself. If DMU fails here, Jiong will be lost forever. His past selves, his present self, all merging into something unrecognizable. The only way to stop this is to break the cycle. But how do you fight something that has already happened? The echo expands. Jiong's final collapse. The walls of the chamber twisted, shifting between past and future versions of themselves. The ruins flickered, one moment whole, untouched, another moment crumbled into dust, and another, still being built, scaffolding rising like ghostly veins. The echo stood at the center of it all, its shifting form towering over them now, no longer just an imitation of Jiong, but a fusion of every version of him that ever existed. Its many blurred eyes turned toward DMU, its mouth splitting open into a jagged approximation of a grin. You cannot erase me. I am already written. I am the pages of his story that were never closed. The temporal strands tightened around Jiong's flickering body, pulling him further into the fracture. His form was breaking apart, dissolving into dozens of versions of himself, child, teenager, adult, all at once. He screamed, but his voice came out, fractured, layered over itself. I don't want to. You don't have a choice, the echo whispered. Jiong's fingers trembled, his eyes, wide, terrified, locked onto DMU's. Please, he choked out. I don't want to disappear. DMU's choice, breaking the cycle. DMU's pulse pounded in his ears. His mind raced. The echo was no longer just trying to consume Jiong. It was absorbing the hourglass's remains, using it to anchor itself within reality. If it fully merged with time, it wouldn't just erase Jiong, it would become him. Something that was never meant to exist, rewriting history itself. DMU clenched his fists. AI, he shouted. Tell me how to break it. AI was already scanning, his fingers flying over his wrist device. Echoes rely on an anchor. This one is using the remnants of the hourglass as its core. Destroy that core and the echo will collapse. Destroy the core, the only thing holding the echo together. But where was it? DMU's eyes darted to the shifting mass of the echo, scanning its twisted form. And then, he saw it. Deep within the echo's distorted body, suspended in its chest like a pulsing heart, the last unbroken fragment of the hourglass. A tiny shard of crystallized time, still glowing faintly with the blue sands that once flowed within it. That was it. That was what was keeping this thing alive. The final strike. DMU takes the risk. DMU didn't hesitate. He surged forward, dodging the tendrils of distortion that lashed out at him. The air burned, his vision fracturing as the echo's influence tried to pull him into its spiral. You cannot remove me, the echo growled, its voice splitting into overlapping distortions. I am already here. I'm already written. I will always exist. DMU gritted his teeth. Then I'll just have to erase the page. With everything he had, he lunged straight into the echo's core, his hand reaching for the shattered fragment of the hourglass. A single breath. The air thickens, compressing inward. The ruined space vibrates, light bending at impossible angles. Time does not flow here anymore. It crashes, rewinds, fractures, and then silence. A silence so deep it feels alive, waiting for something, waiting for judgment. The DMU's gamble, the rewrite begins. DMU's hand pressed against the floating shard, the frozen image of Jiong trapped inside it. The loop tried to reset to undo what he had just done, but this time DMU did not let go. I refuse to be erased, he muttered. Time wants a paradox? Fine, I'll make a new one. The moment his grip tightened, the city screamed. A deafening crack rang out as every floating shard exploded outward, sending rippling distortions through the ruins. The Echo of Jiyong staggered back, eyes wide. What have you done? The walls of the ruins shattered. The entire City the Temporal Arc shifted, as if something far greater had noticed the disturbance. And then a rift tore open in the air above them. The summon descends. At first, it was just a chime, soft, distant, a sound that resonated through the bones rather than the ears. Then, it grew, a deep, resonant hum that carried weight as if centuries of forgotten time had awoken. From the rift, something descended. Adagio. A towering, impossible being, part mechanical, part celestial. Its form was shifting gears and flowing timepieces, etched with constellations that flickered and died like distant stars. A massive hourglass was embedded within its core, filled not with sand, but with memories spiraling in and out of existence. It had no eyes, only a smooth, silvered mask that reflected back endless timelines. The city's voice trembled through it, speaking in 1,000 overlapping echoes. Time has been broken. The balance must be restored. Who among you will answer? The echo versus adagio. Judgment begins. The echo of Jiong stepped forward, something close to panic flickering in its hollow gaze. You weren't supposed to awaken, it whispered. Adagio tilted its head. That is incorrect. The hourglass within its chest rotated once, and suddenly, the echo seized up. A golden light wrapped around the echo's body, pulling at it, unraveling it, like it was being dragged backward into time itself. An echo exists only when time is misaligned. You are a fragment that was never meant to be. The echo struggled. For the first time, it looked afraid. It turned to DMU. You caused this, it hissed. You forced time's hand. DMU stood his ground. No, you tried to make me erase myself. But I chose differently. Adagio raised its hand, and the echo began to disintegrate. Not in destruction, but in reversal. It was being undone. I exist because of his mistake, the echo spat. If I disappear, he will still bear the cost. DMU's heart pounded. This was the moment. The rewrite had forced a choice. Either Jiong's echo was erased completely, or DMU had to offer something in return. Adagio turned to him. Will you correct the balance? The price of time. AI's voice broke through the static in DMU's mind. DMU, whatever you do, choose carefully. If time resets completely, we won't remember any of this. DMU inhaled sharply. This was the price. He looked at Jiong, still trapped in the glass shards, memories scattered. He looked at the collapsing city, reality flickering between being and not being. And he looked at Adagio, waiting for his answer. Two choices. One, let the echo be erased. The timeline stabilizes, but Jiong will be altered. The version of him who caused this might not be the same afterward. Two, take Jiong's burden onto himself. The echo would remain, but DMU would be the one out of sync with time, forever slightly displaced, existing in the cracks between past and present. His breath caught. Either way, someone would change. Adagio's voice resonated one last time. Time does not wait. Choose. The choice is now in DMU's hands. Does he erase the echo and risk changing Jiong, or does he take the burden himself and become something different? Scene 6. The Choice and the Aftermath. The first summons meteoric intervention. The world breathes once more. City the Temporal Arc continues as if nothing ever happened. The people move, unaware of the crisis that nearly unraveled time itself. The students return to their normal conversations, laughter filling the air. But within the cracks of reality, something remains unresolved. DMU is still a variable outside of time's equation. And something has come to correct it. Pi sequence initiated, the cube encapsulation. AI's device flickered wildly, screens flashing as the final step in the PI sequence began. The I sequence continued. Constructing cube-dimensional pattern? A cube-shaped construct materialized, its dimensions infinite yet contained. A perfect balance of geometric time stabilization forming around DMU like an enclosure. And then, DMU was pulled inside. The first summons unobservable presence inside the cube. Reality distorted. Everything was white, empty, vast. And yet, there was something there. A presence so enormous, so unfathomably large, that it could not be seen in its entirety. The first summon had no physical form, no tangible appearance, only the suggestion of something existing beyond perception. DMU felt it, rather than saw it. Like the weight of a star pressing upon his soul, like an unseen force holding the fabric of reality together, watching, calculating. And then, it acted. The meteoric strike, purging the anomaly. Without warning, a meteor-like construct descended from the unseen presence above. It wasn't made of stone or fire. It was pure force, pure law, pure correction. A mass of energy spiraling in the golden hue of an equation finalizing itself. Accelerating toward DMU at impossible speed, DMU's body froze, not from fear, but from the sheer gravity of its existence. It was as if the concept of being unaligned was being forcibly erased from him. DMU's temporal fluctuations at maximum interference. Correction sequence initiated. The meteor crashed into him. The cube trembled, shattered, and yet it wasn't destruction. It was rewrite. DMU screamed as the force passed through him into every fiber of his existence. His unstable form, his in-between state, was being reconstructed from the inside out. Every piece of him that had existed in multiple timelines at once was being forced back into one. A single self, a single existence, a singular being, no longer an error. The cube collapsed into fragmented equations, dissolving as the meteor's light faded. DMU's condition normalized, but not the same. AI's device immediately registered the change. DMU's temporal fluctuations normalized. Existence restabilized within a new structure. DMU gasped, dropping to his knees. His body was no longer flickering, no longer ahead or behind time. He was here. But he wasn't what he used to be. He felt it. Something had been stripped away, something intangible, like a piece of the infinite was no longer his to touch. The first summon's final words. Above him, the first summon's presence lingered, unseen yet undeniable. And then, it spoke. Not in sound, not in words, but in knowledge itself. The variable has been resolved. You are no longer an anomaly. But the next story is yet to be revealed. A final resonance pulsed through DMU, sealing the correction. And then, the first summon faded, its duty complete. The school trip continues. Adagio remains unseen. DMU stumbled slightly as he found himself standing next to the bus again. The students were chatting, laughing, completely unaware. Jiong stretched, yawning. Man, I feel like I just slept for 10 hours. Was this trip longer than the last one? Minho leaned against the bus. Man, I'm just glad nothing weird happened this time. DMU stared at them. They didn't remember. For them, the day had ended normally. But AI knew. AI walked up to him, scanning his device. You good? DMU exhaled slowly. He wasn't sure if he was, but for now he nodded. Yeah. Just thinking. AI smirked, shaking his head. Yeah, me too. The bus doors hissed open, and the students filed in one by one. Everything was back to normal. Except, Adagio had vanished. Not gone, just waiting. Final glimpse. The observer returns. As the bus pulled away from City the Temporal Arc, DMU caught something in the reflection of the bus window. A figure standing on the rooftops, watching. The same shadowed presence he had seen before. But this time, they raised a hand. A small cube hovered above their palm. A replica of the one that had trapped DMU moments ago. A soft, amused whisper drifted through the reflection. You finally see it now, don't you? DMU turned sharply, but the figure was already gone. The bus continued forward. The trip was over, but the story had only just begun. The first summon has forcibly stabilized DMU using a meteor-like correction force. City the Temporal Arc restored, and the students have no memory of what happened. Adagio has disappeared, but its return is inevitable. A mysterious observer continues to watch, knowing more than they should. The next story is yet to be revealed.